Great. Thank you, everyone. This is the special budget meeting of the Board of Finance for I almost said June 12th, February 12th, 2025. A little wishful thinking there, maybe. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, liberty and
justice for all.
Thank you. We will go on with our agenda. It's pretty simple tonight. We have public speak opportunities. We'll go into the budget workshop and then adjourn. So is there any member of the public that would like to speak? Again, I think we'll run through the Board of Selectmen and give them individually an opportunity to contribute if they want. So you don't have to speak now, but you can if you like. So I see Carol, I see Beata, and Samsung. So, Eric, do you want to kind of roll us through? See?
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work.
Hold on a second. Do you want to do public speak? I'm gonna ask Carol.
Sorry.
And yeah. Carol, anything to add? In the public speak portion? I saw you unmute, but I didn't hear anything, so assume no. Go ahead and jump in if you think you do. Okay. And then Beata?
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And then I see a Samsung SMG, not sure who that is. SMG 990. Okay, I'm gonna guess none there. Eric, why don't you go ahead?
Okay.
Well, actually, we'll go through just hit the Board of Selectmen if you have anything to add. Jeff, any comments before we start?
No, we had reviewed this already and made some adjustments as to how Eric initially presented the budget to us at our before our Monday meeting. We had an hour session beforehand. I was working with Eric a little bit before to hopefully add some clarity to the numbers and make them a little bit easier to understand for everybody, the public and the other board members. So I think Eric is pretty good, but always remembering, and you guys always treat it like this is a living document. So there might be some changes that need to be made. Even some items that Eric might have in there already that might get adjusted just because of financial information that we receive later on. So, but you guys are good. You know how to handle it. And I do think that Eric's number and his spreadsheet is better now as of 10 minutes ago.
Okay. I'll go in order. Scott, any comments or anything?
I'm good for now. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thanks. And Ann?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, and I don't see Jeff Murray, so we'll go ahead and continue. Eric, floor is yours.
Okay. So let me pull up. Okay, hopefully you're seeing a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the mill rate calculation page because I think we want to start with kind of bottom line first, and then talk through what we have on the sheet, and then kind of go from there. We all know last year there were a couple calculation errors in the spreadsheet. But these numbers are consistent with what was approved last year as a budget. And that's why the column says fiscal year 2024-25 approved budget. So what we're projecting is that the total expenditures increase from about 12.8 million to about 13.5 million. That's total expenditures. And if you scroll down to budget by entity, you can kind of see the magnitude of each of the three main elements that make up our budget. This was the number I had from the Andover Elementary School. which is a difference of around 381 million or $381,000. The RAM budget increase is $160,000, and the increase in the town budget is $102,000, in round terms, which gives you a total increase in expenditures of $643,000, about 5%. And as a percent wise, the portion that I'm responsible for, which is the town budget, is increasing about 2.4%. Now, when you look at total estimated revenue, you can see the total estimated revenue is down a little bit. And when we get into the weeds on the main budget page, we can talk about what's going up and what's going down. The thing to keep in mind is that most of the estimated revenue that we get comes from the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut does not have a budget ready to go. Well, the governor has a budget. I believe the Senate has a budget, but they're a long time before agreeing on a final budget. So currently, the biggest thing that affects the town of Andover is that the governor's budget decreases ECS funding to the town, which is the educational cost share, by about $89,000. But he's also proposed that cut 2 years in a row prior to this. And both times the House and Senate, the finally agreed on bill, restored that funding. So I think that number may go up by that $89,000 value, but I don't know at this point. As a placeholder for use of fund balance, I put in $190,000. I think we probably actually can use quite a bit more fund balance if the board so chooses, because I think we had a pretty considerable surplus, and we're being audited right now. So I'm hoping in a week or two, I will have a stronger number, for what that could potentially be. And then it's up to the board to decide how much of that excess from the previous year they want to use from the fund balance to offset the cost in the proposed budget. The line for abatements and exemptions, that has gone up considerably, but that is pending a public meeting where potentially the fire department is looking to increase the value of the abatements to fire department members. It's been allowed by state law for a number of years, and they've asked the town to consider upping that to increase retention. So that would increase that budget line item a fair bit. The bottom line is this budget ends up with about $10,678,000 to be raised by taxes, which is a significant increase from the last time around. Most of you probably already know on that point, if you look at line 13, the grand list for the first time in a long time is decreasing. And the grand list itself is decreased about 2%. And there are two causes of that. The first is that there hasn't been a lot of new construction, so there's not a lot of things adding to the grand list, and changes in federal or state law, which granted a much greater exemption to some disabled veterans, is affected in the mill rate. And also the switch from the way motor vehicles were taxed before has changed this year to a straight MSRP plus a depreciation schedule. So those two things decreased the grand list considerably by somewhere around $6 million. So it's a pretty significant jump. And the bottom line is, when you carry that all the way through, if you had a single estimated mill rate, and we'll talk about why we're not going to be able to do that this year, that mill rate as proposed would be about 34.1. So that is a really large jump. That's a mill rate increase. That's quite substantial. So we all have to be aware of that going in. So the reason why we can't have a single mill rate this year is because the state has capped the mill rate for motor vehicles. In other words, and we can talk about how we present this, and we may eventually want to put all that data up here and build it into one part of this budget. But for now, we left it at the bottom because people are used to looking at a single mill rate. And I was concerned it would make people more confused if we started throwing multiple mill rates out there. But the bottom line is to be raised by taxes. This is the number of funds to be raised by taxes. If you cap the mill rate at 32.48, which is what the state requires, and you split the grand list into two components, the grand list for personal and real property combined, and the grand list for taxable motor vehicles. Since you know what this number is, and you know what the cap is, and you're going to be overall in the cap, you can figure out how much money, which is column D39, will be raised by motor vehicle taxes. That means everything else gets raised by personal and real property taxes. So that's the 9.6 number. And then that yields a mill rate on personal and real property of 34.29 mils. So even greater jump than just the single if it was just one mill rate. Does that make sense to everybody? Because I know this is the first time as a town we've had to deal with. A lot of towns have had split mill rates for multiple years, but Andover has not.
Makes sense.
Any questions from the Board of Finance on there? It made sense to me. It was also explained in Eric's email from earlier a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay.
Joanne, you got name it? Or
Yeah,
hand it?
I mean, obviously I'm gonna have to digest it. Like Mark said, everything made sense. I had been looking, I wish I took the time to read it, but I will. And this is one option you're saying, if this budget passed as is, we would have to make it work, we would have to go with the split mill rate?
Well,
option.
unless we can bring the total mill rate for the town down to 32.47, which I don't think would be practical, or we don't have an option because the state says you cannot tax motor vehicles at greater than 32.47. Okay.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. Okay, so that's that. And let's talk about what things, let's go back and I just want to say this before I forget, because Jeff Murray, we didn't get to it at the last meeting, but I know Jeff Murray was adamant about increasing the line item for senior transportation to enable the town to undercoat the senior transportation vehicles annually to cut down on corrosion and to pay for a scheme to wash. And that total was about $3,500 to do those things. But we adjourned that meeting and went to the regular meeting before we get to that. So I just want you guys to hold that in mind, because I think the Board of Selectmen would probably want you to include that in the budget, which would increase it somewhat. Okay, everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Joanne has a question.
Sorry, just one more question on what you did say. I'm sorry, I just couldn't find my notes. When you were, because a couple of us have been at the Board of Selectmen 2 budget hearings already, so I kind of had things in my head before that I would have brought up, and now I'll redirect. But your number that the town was gonna increase by as far as, the higher, we knew AES was going up 381, you said RAM 160, and then you said the town in round numbers will be increasing 102. That's a big
Correct.
change from what you've been presenting previously. So did we factor in something that we're not aware of? Because in my notes, it was over 200,000, like 280,000, I thought.
Well, so there was two things. One, we had a calculation error
Okay,
in one of the previous spreadsheets. And two, before the Board of Selectmen's last meeting, the board decided to remove the extra $40,000 that the Rec Commission was hoping to get
right.
to update the backboards.
Mhm.
And they took some additional money out of the capital budget. So total, they decreased the budget, or in round numbers, about $80,000, and the rest was a calculation. issue.
Perfect. Thank you, Eric, because I knew, that was a high number. I knew there was some errors you were gonna make. So that was a result of the corrections that you made. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
So
the deductions, yeah.
yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what things, what are the big causes? Because I'm not conversant enough in the school budget to make any commentary about that. I want to talk strictly about the town budget. So overall, the town budget is an increase of about 2.4%. So moderately reasonable. You can make a decision whether that's acceptable to you or not as a board, and we can talk about the details. So within that overall town budget, the capital portion of the budget decreases about 6%, or about $75,000 as proposed. And the operating part of the town's budget increases around $180,000. So up in the operating, down in the capital, netting out to, just over $102,000 in the town budget. So what are the contributing factors? First and foremost, the town runs somewhere around $1 million, in direct salary. So if you take a 3% raise as your kind of baseline, that would be about a $30,000 increase, roughly, to the town total personnel costs. And we can look at it later. There's a tab that's specifically for employee costs that rolls into the rest of the budget. There are but the overall salary increase is on the books currently at about a 7% increase. So what are the contributing factors to that? The largest single contributing factor that is the proposal to make the senior center director a full-time position. The number two, the second largest one, that's about a $16,000, difference. The proposal to make one of the public works employees from a maintainer 1 to a maintainer 2, that's about a $12,000 change. The increase for the senior center assistant, and then a stipend for the finance assistant. So that comprises the majority of the difference between what a 3% increase and what the total increase that's proposed are.
Just the point of, just for the board for reference, you don't have to necessarily memorize all this. Eric summarized this in his email. If you hadn't had a chance to look at it, you can look back at it and it's all there. So go ahead,
Right.
Eric, sorry.
So the other thing is that there's a total benefits increase this year of $23K. which works out to about a 5% increase. There's a bunch of factors that lead to that. And there is a healthcare and MRF tab in the budget that we can go over that kind of explains and walks through that. As most of you know, the healthcare consortium, which is one of the large contributing factors to this, has increased 8% this year per the consortium. And a lot of our members have healthcare. So that's one of the contributing factors. And it's also a contributing factor that it tracks with the benefits track with total salary. And so since total salary is going up a 7% increase, there's also a larger than 3% increase in benefits. And we'll have plenty of time to dig down into the weeds on that. Does anybody have any questions on that? Shoot.
Right. I know that, and I want to preface this by saying I'm only addressing a couple of things tonight because I know we have the Board of Selectmen here and they make big decisions on salary and things like that. I don't pretend to want to do any of that. I just, for the Board of Finance members that weren't at the 2 previous budget meetings that a few of us were, some questions did come up and I've already broached a couple things, in my opinion, that should maybe be looked at. And, I just want to, what do I want to say? I just want to bring it to their attention, my thoughts on it. I mean, this is something that I do for a living. I work for a town myself and I know how things are done. So I don't know if this is the appropriate time. I want to say that to Mark Brinker because he wasn't there, but I did make a point the other night at the budget meeting, just things, because I think a lot of the budget and increases that are going to happen across the board, as we see, it's a big undertaking this year. Last year, there was a 16% increase. This year, we're looking at another big increase for the taxpayers. So I feel like it's my job to bring things forward. If they're not agreed upon, that's not my decision, but I was put on this board for a reason. So
I think if there's specific things, Joanne, probably the best thing to do, I mean, one of the things I think that we should keep in mind for tonight's meeting, and I kind of wanted to mention this earlier, is that we should try to pace ourselves.
This is
And
June.
I feel
We
like
have
this
a
is
lot of
my,
meetings, so,
yeah.
but I think once we get to the detail of each section and
Mhm.
subsequent meetings, then would be the time to kind of bring up specifics that you think, like, hey, I think we might want to look at this potential change in this line item.
100%. But
Yeah.
Mark, what I'm saying is I think that the things that I wanted to bring up will only be, I don't think it's anything that we can decide on. I think it's decided after today and then it's brought to them.
Well, we can decide on line items, not specific salaries necessarily.
Yeah, I'm only going to bring, it's going to be quick, I promise. But I was prefacing
Okay.
that for you because you haven't been present at the other 2 meetings where a lot of
Yep.
people were. So I didn't want you to think I'm just diving in. So now I was trying to keep myself at. So all I was going to say, and I am going to speak to this really quick, like Eric said, some of the big changes are, and I am a union member and that's how unions operate. So last year we did bring on this maintainer. We understood, Jay came on, we all took the time to listen so that they could have 2 groups of 2 guys. He was hired. This has nothing, I'm sure he's a great guy, I'm sure he's a good worker. Anybody that's hired in a union job generally is higher qualified, but comes in kind of as the low man and then works their way up. So all I want to say, as someone that got voted on this board and something that came to my mind, that I was surprised that all of a sudden we would just elevate a person to a maintainer too. Generally, there's a procedure that happens. There's an opening, people bid on it. You get it, you advance that way through the year. So our town kind of does things a little bit different. So that was just surprising. And as we're looking for places that might get reduced eventually, that was a big ask. The guy was, and not talking about him, it's just a $12,000. What also goes along with that is the MRF and the retirement. So there's that. So I had an issue with that. I think that the people that only can decide on that are the Board of Selectmen. They may only be here tonight. So I feel like it has to get out there. It has to be something that was thought about. And then we know that Jeff Murray did bring up, and I brought up at a previous meeting too, that last year we voted on the senior center director salary being capped for a full-time person at 50,000. And now, again, whatever decisions are made at a higher level, I'm speaking to management now because they're the management. Eric does their work for them. So the management brought on a person for a certain salary, but part-time hours, and now they're looking to create another full-time position. So that's another big chunk that the taxpayers are taking. So that's a consideration. That's not a union position, so I don't feel either way about that. That's a decision that'll have to be made. And then the last thing that I'm gonna just propose to them, I promise I don't have a lot to bring forward tonight, but these are the personnel things, are to make sure that I know privately in emails in the past, when people get the stipends, everybody's getting their 3% increase. I believe it was said, Eric, I've done this, that does the stipend then become part of their salary and then the town is responsible for the combined thing when they do the retirement? So all of these things factor into raises every year. Positions get raises as 3%. If someone's getting a $6,000 stipend, are we also paying MRF on that? Or I thought it was decided we didn't. So that's a question, trying to get to these quickly in personnel matters. And then what has to be looked at, as we saw the big increase in the health benefits that was brought forward, as far as I think it's 240,000. I feel like I've made this in private a lot of times. It needs to be out there. We understand that health insurance is a great benefit. I'm glad that we offer our great employees health insurance when they need it, whether they need single or they need family. Good. I onboard people at work. I've never met a person that didn't need insurance that signed up for insurance. They're either on their parents' policy until they're 26, or they are, they need it. They're of age, or they're a family providing for their family, so they take insurance. I feel like it's time to look at where we could save the town 25,000, where we're giving this fee in lieu of taking insurance, which is no other town does it. I've done my research. Hebron does it at a very low level. We just do it at such a high level that it works out. And I'm sorry, Mark, I know you don't want me to get in the weeds, but I've researched this long enough, and it's my only chance to talk and appeal to the Board of Selectmen. We are actually, when we pay people in lieu of insurance, an amount of $6,600, it goes up every year too. I want them to get a waiver. I want them to get a waiver of like $1,000 continuously, but that's 25,000 right there that, I would like the town to seriously consider looking at that as a change, not for these good employees that already get it. If I was on the union side and someone offered me $6,000 because I didn't need insurance, I'd be doing my happy dance, but I just think that we're overpaying for that. I've talked to Eric about this. I used to have conversations with Adrian. People, it adds like $6 an hour to certain people's wages. It's $127 a week. I've done the math for every single, some people, it gives them a raise of almost $4 an hour. It's just a big thing. So thank you, Board of Selectmen, for indulging me. I've sent multiple emails to no avail, but no other town does this. I've researched all our area towns except for Hebron, who does that, minor amount. So I'd be all about a minor amount and saving the taxpayers money there. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, any other questions for Eric before he goes on?
And for the record, that was a Board of Selectmen initiated thing, not a Eric Anderson initiated thing. Although
Fair enough.
I've been gratified how many employees have taken it.
Yes.
So,
Absolutely.
yep.
Okay, let's, can we go ahead and go back to where you were and?
Thank you for
back
my
on the-
moment on that.
Let-
I have a
let
lot of
me-
support for that.
Let me ask a question, Eric. Where in your document does it show, so everybody can get to how many people actually take advantage of that?
So if you went to the tab that says healthcare plus MRF, you can see a list of everybody that is eligible for healthcare, their healthcare status, whether they are single, family, or fee in lieu of. You can see that we currently have 4 people that take fee in lieu of at this point.
Joanne, we'll look at all those.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I really did research other towns, and it's not that I want to give them a waiver. But I think and it goes up every year. It's just getting to the point of so high that, and it's really increasing a lot. So thank you.
The only thing that I would say to you and that we need to look at, and I'll do the math, is that if those 4 individuals took healthcare at the level they could, what is the total cost we're in?
I
It would
get
double.
it there, Jeff, but as someone that enrolls people, no one is because they're gonna pay out so much more by taking it. And if they need it, that's a gamble I'd be willing to take. If people need it, you may get 3 employees in a row that need it, then you get 3 that don't.
I'll
Yeah.
take a look, make sure we take a look at it.
Thanks.
Okay, in terms of other notable increases, we did adjust today the resident trooper line item up. So Trooper Brett Cook has been selected as the next resident state trooper for the town of Andover. He's definitely more senior overall than Sebastian Nessie was. So the state police did give us, their budget office did give us an estimated cost for him next year of $153,000, which I then substituted into the budget. So that is an increase over what we had allotted last year of almost $14,000. I would caution you though that all of those numbers are subject to change because they never completely decide what their indirect rate and what costs are going to be assigned to that trooper until very late in the budget year, and often after July 1. So, but that's the best estimate I have for the cost of that. The other thing that's a significant change is the cost of the brush pile removal. Many of you know we've had that discussion in years past, whether we make that a permanent fund and fund part of the cost every year, because we tend to only grind the brush pile either every 2nd or 3rd year. But it's starting to get pretty big. So by the time July rolls around, we will definitely be needing to do the brush pile. So that line item is either 0 or $18,000 to $20,000, and it keeps going back and forth. This year happens to be the $18,000 one. So that's a pretty big jump in the budget. So in terms of big chunks, that is the majority of it. So what I would like to do is just really quick. So when you start looking at the spreadsheet itself, you kind of understand how this works, is that we're on the mill rate calculation page, which is kind of the bottom line numbers for the town. The first tab in line is the main budget tab. And if you remember, we all got beaten up a little bit last year about not actually corresponding to the columns that the charter required. So this looks a little different than last year, but these are the columns required by the charter. I had the treasurer put it in that format. So the first part of it is the income streams. Those are broken down into property tax and everything related to property tax. This number in blue is there because it's linked to the previous sheet. This number flows from the mill rate, which calculates how much current taxes, we have to generate. The other thing to keep in mind is we have to certify a grand list in, by February 1st. But then a lot of things happen that affect the final set of bills that go out to customers. So we set a mill rate based on this, but in the intervening time, we may get more veterans exemptions that fill into that. And people may add motor vehicles, which may increase, or there may be things that decrease that. So even though the mill rate is based on the grand list as of February, when the actual bills go out, they don't always total up to exactly this number, because the final things on the grand list as of July 1 are always a little different than what is on the grand list at earlier in the year in February when it's done. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. So the other thing on here is that Cheryl has asked to remove some of the grant funding that we were accounting for in the main budget, because she feels that money is going into permanent funds that roll over anyway, or multi-year funds, and shouldn't be part of this budget. So that's kind of her guidance. There's a little bit of that built into this budget. It doesn't make a huge difference. The other thing in terms of lost revenue is the fact that we are not working with Vale East anymore. So the amount we're receiving for rentals that we're anticipating is down pretty significantly versus before. So investment interest. It appears right now that we're on track to collect more than what we're proposing in interest by $20,000 or so. But that's a very variable target, because we don't know what the feds are doing to the interest rate, and that affects the interest we get from the STIP account. So this is hopefully a relatively conservative estimate of what our investment interest will be in this year. Anybody have questions on that? Other thing to keep in mind, as far as I know, the Board of Selectmen is not considering increasing the fee for the transfer station. That is something they could look at if they so chose, if they wanted to increase revenues. And the same thing with fees for building and land use. You could increase the relative cost of building permits if the town so chose, if they wanted to bring in more income to offset some of the increased expenses. Okay, so big expenses. These are the education budgets. They are, those are fairly substantial, but they are what they are, and they're not something that I have any control of. The Board of Finance can make whatever decisions relative to that they want. So that's the major part of, or that's the major portion of revenue. Under expenses, these two combined is about 2/3 of the total budget are wrapped up in those two line items, basically $9 million. So that's a fairly significant thing we have to deal with. Enrollment is increasing at Andover Elementary School. At RAM, the town's levy percentage decreased just a little bit this year, which helped our numbers. But when we account for the RAM education number from last year, this 4,150,000, that number included money that they were giving back to the town from their unexpended surplus. So their actual budget, their budget was higher, but their budget minus what they were returning to us brought it down to that value. I don't know whether they're going to consider that again. That may decrease that number, but I don't know. I haven't seen any indication that their board is contemplating doing that. They could be doing it in the next couple weeks because they just released the RAM audit, which I can forward to the board if you guys want to see that. Questions up to that point?
Just a comment, Eric. So we have next week, we have the AES district will be presenting their budget on our
Okay.
meeting on the 19th. And we'll try to get Colin some time to maybe stop in and just go over the quick review of the RAM budget. As everyone I think knows, that's voted on separately from our budget, but just so we have that opportunity to hear from him.
So I did ask Colin to present at the meeting that I am going to miss in March. I think I had forwarded that to you. I can get you the date of that. I don't know it off the top of my head. And he replied that he would be available there. If you wanted to bump him up, I'm sure he could probably accommodate that.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing a copy of that, but yeah, it's sometime the third week in March or second week in March. I'm not sure, but okay.
Yeah, I think it was the second week of March.
Mark, I had thought that the superintendent had asked to come in March 19th. Did you say next
Oh, I'm
week?
sorry. You may be right, Joanne.
Yeah, so I don't think we're expecting Andover Elementary.
Yeah, it
to
was
come
it was
back.
much later because we were waiting for
Yep.
them to finalize.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Good catch. Yeah.
No problem.
Okay. Okay. So, and now I just want to talk to you about structurally how this budget is developed. So when you're looking at this spreadsheet, and we'll have plenty of time to go over every last line item in the main budget, but I just want to talk to you about kind of how everything flows through this, because there's a lot of tabs in this budget. There is a main employee cost tab, which lists all of the employees. Although you'll notice there's a couple things where the cells are merged. One of them is the senior transportation drivers, because I find it's easier to just track total driver hours in a year and base the budget off of that, because all the drivers make the same amount of money. So that's that. This sheet lists everybody, and it's color coded by what their arrangement is with the town. So if you see, it's color coded elected officials. As you know, the salary for elected officials is a Board of Finance decision. Ultimately, the Board of Selectmen has to approve union contracts. So the light tan are those people that are subject to a union contract. The green ones are employees that are basically hovering right at the minimum wage. So we hope the increase that we have built into this budget will keep them above minimum wage when minimum wage changes next January. So, but we're not sure because the state doesn't announce what the new minimum wage is. It's indexed off of inflation. So depending on what inflation was, there's a chance those employees will get a little bit of a bump, that's not accounted for in this budget. So does anybody have any questions about how that's developed? The Board of Selectmen has made a decision that their for the non-union employees, that the target is a 3% salary raise. So that is what's built into pretty much all of these, unless somebody has a prior a standalone contract, in which case then the terms of the contract prevail. Okay, so
Eric?
that's this. Yep.
Just a quick question. Sorry, my eyes are gonna see. And this is very quick. I know that the town clerk had resigned and that's an elected official. So,
Correct.
and I know there's thoughts and talks, from the other evening of what might happen. Are we, or will the Board of Selectmen decide whether they keep the full salary in this budget thing, or they reduced it based on, I don't know, is that a factor at all, or we're just keeping a placeholder at this point?
So at this point, I'm just keeping a placeholder. I put a little note that I'm waiting on a Board of Selectmen decision on how that plays out.
Okay.
So I did not include, since we're going from a town clerk that has been here a really long time and was
Right.
getting a longevity bonus for that from the Board of Finance, I made the assumption that since we're not going to be able to hire or elect a town clerk that has experience, that you probably wouldn't reissue that. So I took that out of the budget. I left the salary intact.
Okay.
And the board's going to have to decide, how they want to proceed on that. That's not something I have any.
No, thank you. Yeah, I just wondered how that was gonna be handled, so you covered that. I know that's depends.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, so you go from employee cost down to the next tab over, which is healthcare plus MRF. And these then are only the people that are eligible for either retirement or healthcare, or both. In this case, we don't have any employees in that 20 to 26 hour non-union category that would be eligible for MRF, but not eligible for healthcare. You can see in column O the status of everybody. Now, in
Eric,
truth,
sorry, as you touched on that, can you clarify for us? Is it up to over 25 hours they're eligible for insurance now? Is that the cutoff?
So yes, over
Health
26
insurance.
hours is eligible for health insurance. There is one exception to that. That is, there's one union employee that had it already prior to the previous union contract.
Right.
And the union was not willing to give that up. So that employee
It's okay,
retained.
she got grandfathered in. I'm just,
Yep.
yeah, just for the rule. And then for MRF, you just said it. I'm just making little notes again. For MRF is 20 hours or more?
Yes, and that
Okay.
is state law. That is not something the town can modify. Going forward, there is the legislature and the state comptroller's office have been wheeling around a proposal to come up with a new tier for MRF that's available for towns for new employees. If you look at the MRF town contribution, currently it's 16.71%, which sounds exorbitant, but the problem is that similar to the state of Connecticut having radically underfunded the retirement plans for state employees, which is underfunded by around $40 billion right now statewide. The MRF program, the municipal retirement program, is underfunded by about $1 billion. So,
Jeez.
yeah, with a B.
Wow.
So of that 16.71%, only about 5% basically is actuarially for somebody that's employed right now And the 11% is making up for the fact that they underfunded the thing so dramatically in the past. So just so you're all aware of that. Unfortunately, the town really doesn't have any practical way to break
Right.
the MRF contract. I know I looked into it when I first worked for the town because I would have much preferred just a 401k instead of MRF, but that's just,
Eric, and I had researched that too, just real quick, because this is the only night on this, trying to see, because I know a lot of towns have gone into the 401k or defined,
yep.
defined contribution just to save money. So it's something that, right. I'm not even gonna go there. I know we have a small amount of employees, but that's
Yep.
interesting. So you can't get out of it even if you wanted to?
No. Multiple towns have tried to get out of MRF, and the state of Connecticut has sued them over it. And so far, nobody's prevailed against the state in court.
Got it.
In fact, the town's labor attorney is involved in suing the state over multiple ones for multiple towns. But so far, I don't believe they've been successful. And his advice was,
Don't try it. Then
Don't try it.
that's my follow-up question was why it was so important at the time with those stipends that people earned, like if that is really considered their wages, that's not for the job, and if MRF gets taken out of that too. But again, these are weeds that I went down before and I thought they were taken care of, but thanks, Eric.
okay, so the next tab over is employee benefits. And so you'll see a lot of pages that look like this. So for most of the major categories in the major budget, there's a subsequent page. Like for instance, if you went to the administrators tab, you would see the line items for the administrator in all the budgets. And these line items are linked and flow directly to the budget. So at some point when the Board of Finance takes over the control of this spreadsheet, as you're producing your final budgets, just remember that this is where you make the changes. Except, like for instance, if you look at salary, the salary for these positions are linked back to that original employee cost. Okay. And then when you get to the employee benefits, these all pretty much link, most of these link back to the healthcare plus MRF, which is how those are calculated. So again, you would make the changes in employee cost. That employee cost change would trickle directly into the healthcare plus MRF page, which would flow into the employee benefits, which would show up on the main budget. So just be aware that these spreadsheets are all totally interconnected between the sheets. And you can kind of tab through. So the employee cost to healthcare to employee benefits kind of move linearly, if that makes sense. And then from there on over, these are all the sub tabs that the town has in the budget that link to the main budget sheet. And part of the reason we do this is we give the individual department heads their own budget sheet to fill out. And then that data gets put into here and should show up seamlessly in the main budget. So administrators tab, this is the finance office tab. There's one for the town clerk. Again, I don't think the board has made any final decisions about when or how that's going to be done. Although the board did indicate that they wanted to see whether we could have a employment contract with Carol so she can continue to assist in the town clerk's office, even though she's officially resigned as the town clerk. And that will be subject to negotiation.
Yeah, and
So
Eric, the assistant town clerk and I heard talk of her the other night. Has she been on board for like a couple months now? Or longer?
not quite 2 months, just about.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So tax collector, that's that one. So tax collector, assessor, there are some increases in both QDS and vision, this time around. And also, if you look on here, it says what things are calculated directly. So we went in one of the things the Board of Selectmen had asked us before was to put it so that you could look at a department budget, and that included all the costs of the department budget. So this sheet shows for that employee what the total cost is for that department. For the salary, it shows the Social Security and Med, health and dental, and retirement. So you have all of that in one shot within the sub budget. So if you want to get at total cost for that department, this is kind of where you can see it. So the registrar's office, the elections, and in most of these cases, the notes here came from the department. They weren't generated by me. They're what we asked all the departments to give us a proposed budget and then also explain, in detail. And I'm happy to share all of that with the Board of Finance. If you want to review all the individual requests, you certainly can. Just depends how much information you want to have. So there's one for elections, building department.
Can I ask a question on all these?
Yeah,
Eric?
Jeff's got his hand up now.
One
Sure.
quick thing. Your MRF number?
Yeah, MRF number's wrong there. But this MRF number is calculated separate of the main budget, so this doesn't. But yeah, I already noticed that's 15.85, and they just announced the new number, so we will correct that. We corrected it on the main page. But this doesn't affect, this is calculated separately from what's on the main budget. So what's on the main budget is correct.
Okay, so just so everybody understands, the MRF number comes from the healthcare and the MRF tab, the main employee cost tab. These are just summaries for the departments, but you want to
Right.
make that number correct. So you got to
Yeah.
change that formula and that number so that the Board of Finance understands the totals.
Yeah, it
Yep.
looks like it's hard coded in each tab, so you're probably gonna have to either
Yep, we'll have to go
put
through
it
it.
in a lock cell somewhere or do them all, yeah.
Yep. So library, library is a little different. Because every year they kind of mix and match with employees. So we try to calculate payroll based on like the total number of hours they're going to work, because they really almost all their employees make the same amount, with the exception of Amy Orlomowski, who's the director of the library, and they have a children's librarian. But the amount of time they allot to the children's librarian isn't that much, so we take care of that separately. And then we just figure global hours for library operations. So civil prep, I would suggest we up the salary for civil prep, because I think that's an area where we've been consistently underfunded, and we got enough grant funding for civil preparedness last year because our existing emergency management communication person submitted all the correct paperwork to the state, that her salary is essentially paid out of paid from the grant money that we got from Department of Emergency Management Services. I'm leaving this $1,000 in the shared vehicle because that's kind of what they asked for. So as many of you know, we share or we have a combined CERT team, the town of Andover with the town of Hebron and the town of Marlboro. So they train together. they were using this really ratty old ambulance that the town of Hebron had gotten rid of. But I believe Hebron used some of their COVID funding and bought them a brand new vehicle for the CERT team. That's technically Hebron's vehicle, but I know it's been shared. So we have to at least be willing to help them out for maintaining that. And it's a fairly small budget overall. So of the large budgets, Public Works is one of the largest budgets. So this comment is incorrect for the Board of Selectmen. That was taken back down to 3%. But it was, I did it in the salary tab. So the number should be correct. It was just the note was old. And we will go back and address, because I think all of these have probably the wrong multiplier for retirement and MRF. Snow removal. We, as you guys probably remember, about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we decreased pretty significantly both the overtime and knocked the salt budget down a little bit. We've held pretty steady. It's going to be a little interesting because this year we plowed more than the previous two, but so far it looks like we're still reasonable on both the snow plow, the plow removal overtime budget, and the sand and salt budget, which are the main things that are part of snow removal. Transfer station. So among the areas where there was a fairly big bump in this is the cost for the compactor lease. So I've been aware for the last 5 years as the town administrator that Willie Waste, which then became Casella, owned 2 of the 3 compactors we have at the transfer station. But they've been charging us for 4 years for a single compactor. Casella finally realized that we had 2 and started charging us for both of them. So that has increased. That's basically doubled the contractor or the compactor lease line item in that, which accounts for most of the increase there. So again,
Rob's got his hand up.
Just
Yep,
really quick question, Eric. What do those things cost?
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
I think, a few years ago, we were asking that question and we were looking around to see whether we were looking at a used one that was around 30,000. And I seem to recall they were somewhere in the $60,000 range to purchase one. Yeah. So, but don't quote me on that. Those are old numbers and I may be misremembering them anyway. But
Okay.
yeah, it is something, we should be thinking about. And now that they're actually, part of the reason why I didn't want to pursue it was because they were only charging us for half of our compactors anyway. So I was in the let sleeping dogs lie category.
Well, now the jig's up, so
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely something to look at. That's it. That's my commentary.
Yep. Custodian. So we only have a single line for custodian, and we don't sub-allocate this to 3 locations because our custodian, Willie Bell, and his wife, Susie, actually clean 3 buildings. They clean the town hall, they clean the library, and they clean the community center. But just so we didn't have to screw around with essentially 3 separate time cards for each location, we've kind of lumped it into one lump sum custodian. And we have a custodian line item in the main budget. We don't sub break it out into what it costs to clean the town hall, what it costs to clean the community center, what it costs to clean the library.
Eric, can I ask a question here?
Absolutely.
So I'm sorry, I'm sure this is probably a simple answer, but on the previous page, what
Transfer
tipping
station.
fees, what tipping fees, what is that?
All right. So hauling fees is every time they got to drive in here, pick up one shipping container or one container and bring it back to Willie Waste and then bring it back to here. We get a per trip fee. And then we get charged for bulky waste in one category. So that's not the cost to haul the bulky waste away. That's the cost to get rid of the bulky waste. And that bulky waste goes to, what do you call it? It gets shipped out to Ohio and it goes in a landfill in Ohio, believe it or not. The tipping fees are the cost for what do you call it? That's the cost for like basically not bulky waste, but garbage and recycling.
Oh, wow, just to
It's
empty
the
it.
hauling fees,
basically.
basically.
So it's not the hauling fee. That's the cost. So we get charged
The
every time
weight,
it comes
We
and
get
goes.
charged separately to haul it and separately to leave it.
Correct. And
yikes.
then
That's the-
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not an insignificant fee by any means. The transfer
Is
station
this
is
some,
expensive to operate.
yeah, and there's no other way to negotiate a contract somewhere else, or is that a,
Not practically, because in terms of the locally, Casella is the biggest recycling center. And we actually negotiate our contracts with Casella through something called Mid-NAROC, which is the Mid-Northeast Recycling Consortium, of which 13 towns sit on the board of that. I am Andover's representative for that. So we go out collectively every year for our contracts for hazardous waste, recycling, tires, you name it, all the things that a transfer station has. And then, we negotiate a lot of the stuff in bulk with Casella. So the individual towns that sign a contract with Casella are relative to this. So pretty much everybody in this area is using Casella. The only thing we could potentially do is if we owned a tractor trailer and we had a roll on, roll off, we could potentially, haul the material ourselves. But that's also a lot of labor.
Yeah.
So, and we'd need to own a tractor trailer and,
Yeah.
Be willing to do it. So,
And pay someone to drive it and
Yeah.
right. So that's the only.
Maintaining it.
maintain
yeah,
it.
okay, thanks
Yep.
for that explanation.
Okay. So fire marshal, probably, I don't know how many of you know, but we use, it's not really a shared service, but we and the town of Bolton share both a fire marshal and a deputy fire marshal. So we pay for him, Bolton pays for him, and we're actually in a cooperative agreement with two other towns because, if something really bad happens, it's possible you need more than, one fire marshal, or if the deputy is around and not the fire marshal. So we have reciprocal coverage also with two other towns as part of this. And we pay a prorated portion of the fire marshal and assistant fire marshal's mandated training, and then dues and subscriptions. And he does have a little bit of an equipment budget.
Eric, can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
The custodian services, is that done once a week?
So no, currently Willie cleans, I think he cleans all 3 buildings twice a week. I know the town hall gets cleaned twice a week. And right now that both the community center and pretty sure the library is getting cleaned twice a week too. I could be wrong. That might only be once.
Okay, and what about the school? The school has their own
Yeah,
custodian.
the school has several custodians, so they're completely separate from the town.
And we can't combine them?
I can answer that. Absolutely not. Willie does the best job ever. I don't know if you notice how clean that town hall is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That gentleman cares and does a phenomenal job. So please, Board of Finance, don't mess with that one.
Okay.
But as far as the school goes, and combining, Eric, didn't at one point in time we try that?
I think we talked about it, but certainly not in my lifetime have we tried that.
I think we were discussing it when Sally was the superintendent, and I don't think it came off well, Louise. So
Okay,
Willie and his wife are they do a phenomenal job.
And the other thing to keep in mind with you get with Willie and with his wife is you get people that are very talented in a sense that they don't do just cleaning. Like if you look at all those sound attenuation bars that the town has put up, that was all done by Willie and Susie. A lot of the mounting, a lot of the painting that goes on. Last year they completely re-primed, re-spackled, and repainted the exterior windows at the Andover Museum.
I'm gonna say we're sold, okay?
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay,
Let's move on and try to stay out of the weeds, guys.
all right, fair enough. So this line item has both senior citizens budget and Andover senior transition, and that is one thing that's definitely an error. The Board of Selectmen voted the last time to increase that line item. So that line item is incorrect, and let me see. I'll have to see how that propagates through, but
On the
they
spreadsheet you sent around, they doubled it.
correct. I think it just got, I think I probably just updated it on the main page and not here. I will check on that one.
Yeah, I'm seeing it as 12.5, I think.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, is that line 5 or the resident
Senior
services?
lunch,
Yeah,
senior
820. So, I mean, that's since it's doubling. Have we just been under budgeting that thing?
Yes.
yes. Yes, we have. And
Okay.
the Board of Selectmen also made a decision that they wanted to keep the fee schedule for that as low as they could to encourage socialization and senior participation in general. So, and I could supply it to you, but basically Tess gave a breakout of the costs of the programs that they're running so that the board could make a decision how much they wanted to fund it, you know, which basically trickles down under the cost for participation.
Gotcha. Sorry, I actually had a question, and I apologize for having you back up. But on the transfer station, when is the last time that we increased the sticker fees?
Year or two ago, right? It was,
Yeah, we-
Believe 2 years ago, they've been $50 a piece for 2 years.
Okay,
was
so we
40
had them
before
at
that.
40 and we went up to 50 a couple of years ago. Okay.
Correct. And for the record, because the cost of the transfer station has been increasing, the cost of the sticker program right now is paying for about 20% of the total operating cost of the transfer station.
Hmm.
So it has been higher in the past, but you know, as many of you know, since they closed the main trash to energy plant in the state, there's just so much less capacity that everybody's been getting squeezed the last few years.
No, fair enough. Just wanted to remind myself, if that was an option. I don't want to go and propose raising something that we just raised,
Yeah, I mean, I sort of feel like the fee should bring in at least 25% to 30% of the cost of running the facility. But ultimately, that's a board decision, not a me decision. I think the fees are reasonable compared to what you get. Certainly a lot cheaper than getting pickup, but again, it's less convenient than getting pickup.
I mean, I pay for pickup, so I know I'm paying. I forget what I pay quarterly or monthly or whatever it is, but it's definitely a lot more. So,
Yeah.
but no, I don't want to. I just thank you for that. That's all I wanted to know. If it was 2-3 years ago, cool. Okay, we'll look at that. I am assuming when we go through this whole budget, we're going to be looking at a lot of things, and that's one thing to look at. Thanks.
Yep. And in terms of the senior transportation, at least a couple Board of Selectmen members have wanted to increase the vehicle maintenance line item. We did increase it last year to this year based on our expenses, although to be honest, we're going to blow through the $9,000 model amount this year if we repair the Dodge Caravan that has some issues currently. And one of the Board of Selectmen members has, basically wants the town to run them through the wash pretty regularly. So we're going to try to come up with a plan to wash the smaller ones at an automatic car wash regularly, and the larger ones at Coventry's wash rack. If we do that, that budget line item has to come up about $3,500 to accomplish that. I was going to up it, but the Board of Selectmen never formally said they wanted to do that. So I would hope they could make that decision this meeting or the next meeting so we could put that in the budget, because that is not reflected in the main budget currently. Selectmen
Eric,
budget.
question?
Oh, Eric.
on that?
Oh, I have a question too. Go ahead. Can we go back to the previous page?
Yep.
I want to just go on what he was just talking about, Liz. Do you mind if I just follow up on
Go ahead.
that? With the I know that was a hot topic item the other day with the rust or corrosion that's happening on the vehicles. At the town garage down here, there's not a place or somewhere
Let's
that they
talk
can.
about that in public.
Okay.
I'd be happy to talk to all of you individually in private about strategies for washing the vehicles, but
Oh, I just looked into it. When something comes up, I looked into it. So, oh yeah, I wasn't going to mention people doing it. I just wanted to know, all right, what the facility, I'll go take a tour. Thank you.
understood.
I have a question about the resident services coordinator. What is that? The social services person? What is that?
That is, so there's a couple oddities so the state has a requirement for the towns to have a couple of individuals to cover things related to social services. So the problem is the state recommends a minimum number of hours that person be available, which is like 20 hours a week. And the problem is that we used to have a separate individual that did that job. And when that person, for health reasons, was no longer able to do the job, I assigned that to an existing town employee and just paid him a portion of the cost that we had allocated previously to that, because I thought it was more economical than having that as a standalone employee. I just didn't want an extra employee if I didn't have to. And the person that's doing that is the person that's kind of responsible for renters rebates anyway, which is one of the programs that normally falls under that category. That also deals with when we have problems with hoarding. That person is one of the leads on the town's hoarding task force, which I never knew towns had until I became a town administrator.
So I
But
guess,
apparently towns have those.
yeah. How busy is that role?
So it depends. It's seasonal. It's not hugely busy. But I think the reason why I wanted that attached to an actual staff person is because because you're, per the state, you're supposed to have somebody available pretty regularly. And the only way you can have somebody available pretty regularly is to have that, have that a staff person. Because we're not going to pay somebody, 20 hours a week to sit here and be that person.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
I get that. I guess I'm trying to understand it. It sounds like a role that somebody in one of the departments could perform, which I know somebody is. I don't understand why a separate stipend for something that sounds like it's kind of you have to be there, right? Someone has to be there to be able to answer the call, but it doesn't sound like it might be that busy of a role.
Liz, to piggyback on your question, and we're not going to attack it, but since this is I understand and am glad that you didn't hire a full-time employee, because I'm sure in a town of 3,000 people, like Liz is saying, it is a small amount of time. I just, sometimes wonder as I'm looking through, preparing for these meetings, that when someone does get a stipend, each year it goes up for a job that's probably not too much. And I don't want to minimize anybody's job. We all have
Right,
functions
it's a
and
role.
jobs.
It's
And that,
right,
and
people
then going
hold
into
many
the
fun or
birth thing.
perform.
Yeah, that's one of my questions. So I'm just piggybacking on you too, Liz, that every year
Sure.
that, the employees, sometimes people would have a stipend for like $4,000 and it just stays there. And then if this is what I see happen in my employment, stipends don't automatically go up all the time. Everything in the town of Andover is always going up the percentage. And I'm just trying to, our budgets are getting bigger and bigger. The increases are getting bigger and bigger. So these are, the things that the contracts can't change, the union things can't change, but these little things, there's a lot of things that I don't quite understand why, unless someone has told you, Eric, that each time like that there's a new budget, they have to go up 3% too. That's all for those smaller jobs that people are doing.
Right. And the reason for that is that the only two people that are getting stipends currently, other than the town clerk, which that was a Board of Finance thing, not a union thing, are because both those employees are union employees. So any additional responsibilities that you expect of a union employee have to be via a memorandum of agreement and negotiated with the union. So those MOAs are separate from the union contract because I always want them to be severable. In other words, if the town at some point decides, like for instance, or the tax collector has a stipend because in addition to being the tax collector, she is also my admin assistant. So we went from two people down to a single person. And we used that money hopefully to be able to pay for some construction administration. But with the understanding that at some point we may decide that's not working and we need a full-time, not a full-time, another part-time administrative assistant for me, that can be backed out of the contract.
Mhm.
So, I
I'd
mean,
like to request that we kind of keep the high level view going
Yep.
here. It's getting a little longer in the meeting, and
We're
we're
getting
gonna
the
have plenty
weeds.
of time to hash out these details as we go along.
But Mark, will we have time to ask these like employee related questions without the Board of Selectmen present? That's all. I don't
Well,
think
we're
these are
really
gonna-
looking for information from Eric, and ultimately the Board of Selectmen's the executive body, and they'll make those decisions.
Right.
So, he can
Yeah.
certainly give us the information, we can always manage the line item.
Yeah.
And
I
they can
appreciate
kind of
that. The only last thing I was going to say on a stipend matter is generally, Eric, and I appreciate how you do it and break it out. We get that. Usually, I think that the employees are lucky to be getting the stipends and they're able to perform the function within their same job hours. Usually when a stipend is given, like when we give stipends where we're unemployed, it has to be, they can't be double dipping. So they have to do the stipended job outside of their working hours. So I get your thinking, but they're already, so in order of increasing them year by year, they're already getting a big bonus of, which I understand if it's a different function that doesn't fall within, they get a stipend for that extra job, but they get the good news of getting it done within their workday. Whereas anybody that gets stipends usually has to make sure they're not double dipping and getting it with outside. Thank you. That's it, Mark. That's all this was a topic, so.
sure,
Can I just make one more comment and we can move on?
sure.
Right?
Is this something, since it's such a small role, could this be moved over to the senior center director? Because she's not union, right?
Right, she's not union.
This role could just be moved over, right? And that fee could go away, correct?
You could, but I actually don't think you have enough time available in that role to be adding things to it. Now, you may have a different opinion. We could certainly discuss that if that's the way the board wants to go. But that's also not in her contract. So I don't think she's necessarily going to do it. Yeah. We can certainly
We can
consider
talk
it though.
We'll talk about it.
And which,
In the
Thank you.
weeds, again, we're supposed to be high level here.
Okay.
sure.
Come on, Mark.
Board of Selectmen, very small budget. It's primarily just the Board of Selectmen does get a stipend. 4 of the 5 selectmen agree to get a stipend. The first selectman does not take a stipend. Board of Finance, the only real thing in your budget these days is board clerk wages, BAA, Board of Assessment Appeals. Again, it's mostly just the salary for clerks. I did up the training budget a little bit. I requested them a couple times. I never did get a formal budget for them. But I know at least one member of the BAA was wanting to take the initial course for assessors and BAA members. And I think education's important. So if one of them is willing to step up and take the time to go through it, I wanted to budget for it. Planning and zoning, same thing, board clerk. The biggest line item in here is legal and professional services. That line item, even though it sits within the Planning and Zoning Commission's budget, covers all of the land use agencies. So it covers zoning, inland wetlands, and the zoning board of appeals. That did go up a fair bit this year. I was trying to get an estimate from the town zoning attorney on what our costs go, so that the town is actively in litigation with somebody on Route 6, the gravel pit operation on Route 6. And we expect that at some point we may be able to recoup a lot of our legal costs, but I'm suspecting both in the end of this budget year and the beginning of next budget year, we're going to have increased legal costs for that. And the zoning The legal budget for the zoning commission is separate from the legal budget from the town. The town has two other attorneys that are kind of has a town attorney, and then the assessor's office has its own attorney that deals with just assessment issues. That's planning and zoning. Wetlands Commission, again, the majority of their budget is the cost of board clerk. And for the record, the reason why we do board clerks for some boards, but not most boards, is because the land use commissions and the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance and the Board of Assessment Appeals are the things where you're most likely to get sued if you do something procedurally incorrect and you don't produce good minutes. So that's why in those, for all of those boards, we pay a board clerk.
Eric?
Yep.
I hate to go back again, but I didn't see anything on for training under zoning board of appeals. Is that something you're carrying under a different line? Because I know you always say that you'll cover that when we need training. So I wasn't sure if you carry that separately or.
Yeah, I actually don't think we ever made a line item for zoning board of appeals. I'm not sure exactly why. I believe that's just in the main budget. We can go, we can look, or I can find out.
It is there, 375.
Yeah,
Or-
but I'm just saying we don't have a subsequent, a separate budget page for that because you really only had like one thing in your budget. So up to this year. So we didn't have a standalone tab for you. And there
Well,
are 32 boards and commissions. They don't all get their own separate tab in the budget.
Can I'd like to ask one question. You had said legal fees.
Yep.
Where are all the legal fees segmented here? So I know planning and zoning has legal and professional fees as we're looking at it. So where are the legal fees for the town?
So there is a town legal budget. That's not separate from, there's no separate line item for that. That's just a line item in the main budget. And I'd have to find it. It's in there somewhere.
So it's just a line item in the main budget.
Yeah, we don't have a separate tab because there's only one line item in it. So we don't generally make a tab for a single line item. It's essentially it's its own category, but it's a category that only has one expense.
But you told us that there were two expenses. So you told us there were legal fees for the town attorney and you told us there were legal fees for the assessor's office.
Correct.
How do we identify the split between those two?
We don't. Well, let me back up. So we have a separate budget. Like if you look at 237 in the main budget page, the attorney line fee has the regular legal retainer. That pays for Dennis O'Brien, the town's attorney. Occasionally, I take money out of that line item when we need to talk to our labor attorney. And then below it is the assessor's legal, which it's not a reval year. It doesn't seem like it's unlikely that we're going to have a great deal of legal fees. This line item goes up considerably in years where we do reval when we expect to get sued a few times.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So that's it for all the tabs. Does anybody have any other overall questions or things they want to look at tonight?
Joanne?
Eric, this is just a quick question, with regards to our assessor, who I know is part-time. Does he,
Yep.
and I know he's covered under contract and all of that, am I correct with that? He's in a union, is he in that MEI
Yep, he's an
Okay.
MEIU member.
Okay, even though he's part-time. Does he,
Yep.
so does he get Murph is my question. Does he get retirement from Andover?
I don't think so.
Okay, I was looking at the line earlier today. That's all. I know his hours are limited here, when it's not reval, so. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Eric? It's a lot to cover. I think it was a good review. I think it was helpful to review the tabs and how this all rolls up. If anyone doesn't have access to Excel, I think generally you can open these things in Google Sheets. So you need a Google account to do that. If you need something else, let me know, or PDF prints or something, we can always work that out. Eric, I think you said this has changed from the one you sent earlier today. You're going to send an updated version?
Yeah, it's got a couple little changes.
You're
I
going to
might
correct
try to
the,
go through
the-
tomorrow and change how each tab adds in the MRF costs before I update it and send it to the board.
Okay.
Just,
And I also,
just as a
Okay.
global thing, Eric, just so I can share with the Board of Finance. I mean, listen, on my analysis, as you guys look at this, about 50% of the costs are wages, benefits, and healthcare. So as you guys take a look, so Joanne and you're looking in the right areas. That's where the money is. 58% or 48.89%, according to my calculations, sits in wages, benefits, and healthcare for all of the employees. So if you focus your time there and sit there and see if there's anything we could do on a lot of it, we can't do anything because they're contracted related to those items, but that is where the bulk of the money is that the town spends. So on line 453, when you look at this, there's $3.2 million in town operating budget. 1,115,000 is wages, $237,000 is benefits, and 240,000 is healthcare. So those are the bulk of the money. That's where it's at. High level. Anywhere we can focus on that and reduce that would assist. So I figured I would just give you that info.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Quick
sir.
question,
Oh, go ahead.
if it's okay. Um, I hadn't had a chance to go through the whole spreadsheet before the meeting, but in our last CIP meeting, we heard fire department request for a significant amount of money for their turnout gear. Is that reflected in this? That's all built in?
so it is reflected in,
In the
and
capital?
I thought I gave everybody on the Board of Finance a separate capital sheet that just deals with the capital funds as they're allocated and what expenses come out of each. So currently we are putting in, that's line 431, approximately in the fire equipment, sorry, that line, not the one below.
That's the truck, yep.
$137,000
That's for
a
the
year.
lease, right?
So the lease is expected to be about $125,000. But currently, we have in that account, and I could bring up the other spreadsheet and share that with you if you guys want to see that. I think I did send it to you though. So that has ballpark a little over $400,000 in that account. So if we take out the money directly to buy the SCBA for the fire department, which is the request CI or what do you
Fire
call it?
commission made
CIP
to us,
approved,
the CIP, yep.
and the fire commission requested. If that comes out, there's still the money for the first year, and then this line item more than covers the lease payment, but it doesn't, there may be other things coming down the pike that would
Yeah,
exceed.
the fund gets depleted is really what it boils down to. Okay,
Yeah,
all right, I get it.
Correct.
Just to clarify, Eric, did that capital fund summary was sent, I think with Kate had originally sent it around on the 6th.
Okay.
So it wasn't today, but it was with the prior email, but we did get it. Don't know
Yeah,
if anything's
okay.
changed. That I don't think we got an updated copy of
Yeah.
that.
But
Yeah,
that, you
But
know,
it
because
is, it
that's
does
about,
show the SCBA equipment on the fire truck fund or something.
right, that's about 200K,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
But I do want to be very clear, and what I asked the fire commission to come back to us with was an updated capital plan, because I haven't had a full-blown capital plan from them in like 3 years. So the year before they proposed the fire truck, up to that point when Kurt had been doing it, I would get one every year. And then they really haven't done one since. Or if they have, they haven't given it to me. So I've asked them for that, you know, and kind of made them aware that given what we're budgeting right now, the squad, if we assume a 10-year lease for the squad, over the next 10 years, outside of what they've already asked, there is not a lot of money available to them. So that is a concern.
Sorry.
Eric, are there any,
Oh,
no,
go ahead.
sorry,
I don't
any
know.
of the, any of the projects that you have planned, or remaining, are those in here somewhere that I don't even know. I just, like, for one, I know you mentioned at one point getting more EV chargers. Are those reflected in here? And I mean, how does that work? Do we pay for them? Who pays for them? And where are those reflected?
So I'm not currently looking for more EV chargers.
Oh, where did I hear
But
that?
basically what happens is that so we budget to the goal is to make the funding from year to year to year as similar as possible. So we take a longer look out and we say, okay, let's take Public Works Equipment Fund. So they have a 10-year capital plan, and it's kind of a rolling 10-year capital plan. So we budget for the Public Works Equipment Fund based off the 10-year capital plan. So we try to level fund that every year because we don't want the big shockers, like to come back to the town and say this year we need $1 million for the squad and then nothing next year. And then, so we've done that across all of the major project funds. You know, so the ones where most of the projects that are being undertaken are funded out of are either line 429, which is the multi-use building fund, or out of the building maintenance fund. So like, for instance, the building maintenance fund, we funded a bunch of the HVAC improvements to the town hall. Came out of that fund. For instance, we did a bunch of emergency repairs to the electrical system. So those are like expenses that are out of the ordinary, not like the annual building normal maintenance that you do in a building every year. These are essentially project funds. The multi-use building fund was originally set up to fund the community center, but we were able to spend the majority of the equipment or do the majority of the community center through ARPA grant funding. But that didn't cover the kitchen and that didn't cover finishing off the basement. So I broke it down in the capital fund, but a lot of that money has been assigned to various different things at public meetings. Because see, like whenever I get a grant that requires a town match, that has to go to town meeting unless it's a really small grant. So once the town meeting, like the town meeting agreed to spend money out of that fund for the town's portion of the work at the recreation fields, the new playground, pickleball courts, lighting, that kind of stuff. So that money it's in that fund. We already have the money, but it's earmarked. So most of the money in that fund is already earmarked for something.
It's good, but it's.
Okay. Okay. So the EV chargers, how much are they used and what are they costing the town? Just curious.
So right now, they're not really used at all. Because basically, as soon as we put them behind a paywall, there's been essentially zero usage of the EV chargers since we did that. It actually costs us more, and that's something Jeff McGuire and I have had a conversation. Before they got used a little bit, but not very much. Once we put them behind a paywall, they really haven't been used at all. It's costing us more money to pay for the paywall account than it would be to not do that and just leave them available for the public. Those chargers were originally put in primarily because the town was looking at purchasing at least one electric vehicle for senior transportation. But the board elected not to do that. We are technically required to maintain them because the vast majority of money to build those came from an Eversource grant that we applied for and got for the town. So the town paid a few $1,000s to install them. Around 20,000 of that money came from the utility company. But technically, we are supposed to keep them available to the public. Does that make sense?
So what does the paywall cost us?
I would have to look it up, but because we have two of them, it's.
And maybe you could
Can't
get
tell you off
back
the top of my head.
back on that or something, Eric. So
Yeah,
I'd
you
have to
can
get
send
back
that back. That's fine. Okay,
It's a monthly
Thank
credit
you.
card charge, and if I remember it correctly, it was $40 a month, or was somewhere in the $500 to $600 range. So
Yeah.
the question was, get rid of the credit card charge, and then all we would sit there and be absorbing would be the electrical usage that somebody would use when they're plugged in.
Thank you.
okay, do we have any other topics we want to discuss, Joanne?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of roll back and Jeff kind of alluded to this. This was the night that we were talking about employees kind of in depth, so I appreciate everyone indulging me with the few questions that I had. I know we're going to be doing, deeper things as we go along, but are we looking at this? I don't know if the Board of Selectmen is still making choices or decisions on some of the topics, or are we, are pretty much we looking at some final, this is the way it's going to be. I didn't know if there's, there used to be a month long of the Board of Selectmen, budget workshops that I used to listen in, and maybe a few cuts would be made here and there. So I don't know what their plan is. That's all. And if we're meeting again one more time, or if this was our meeting.
I know Mark has another one scheduled for next week. That I may not be able to attend that one, but I will try. But to answer your question, the majority of what we've presented to you is contractual. The biggest
Right.
issue I will tell you, Joanne, that we have not agreed on is
Mhm.
related to the community center and those wages that are related to that. The one thing that we did do was agree that for all non-union employees, we would agree with a 3% pay increase to be put into the budget so that it would match our union contracts, so that we were not in excess of our union contracts and then have a
Right.
negotiating point that we have to deal with later down the road. So I would think that we will still evaluate certain items, and Eric will end up bringing those to you during your regular meetings. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to pick up the phone or email. I'm sure we would sit there and, always consider anything, but on the employee standpoint, the biggest one was the 3% raise, and we agreed to that at our meeting. And then the other one was, we have not sat there and finalized the community center side. So that will still be discussed at the next Board of Selectmen meeting.
And I totally understand, Jeff, all the union implications and respect that you kept the 3% for the non-union too. I think that makes it nice, nice working environment. That makes sense. I just wondered if you had already agreed to, I wouldn't have, well, I mean, I think it's important to speak on it from my opinion, the maintainer position, had that already been agreed that that person that came in as a maintainer one will now be elevated? Because that was a big chunk of money too.
Well, that was the hope, and that decision was simply because of the skill level of that individual that was brought in initially. To be
Mhm.
really honest, Joanne, that person should have probably been brought in at maintainer two when he was brought in just because of his skill level. But
Mhm.
the choice was made to keep him in a maintainer one. That is something that we still can discuss, but we also have to remember that it's really important to consider the in the way that the Department of Public Works, work crew will age out. And so trying to make sure that we age them in a correct pattern to sit there and keep building up the skill and the pay grades for those individuals. But um,
And again, it's not personal, and I feel I just had to bring it.
don't worry about it. Isn't I know
Yeah,
what
no,
you're
but
talking
I need
about.
this. This is a
I know where
public
you're talking.
meeting. I
Yeah, I
want the
know.
people that I know. It's not personal. It's just a union thing. And
Correct.
that, but we do have a small town, so I'll listen. Yeah.
Correct. And we have not, I would sit there and tell you that this budget in total still needs to be reviewed by the Board of Selectmen in some level of detail. We're not just going to walk away from specific line items. The majority of this is set. I mean, I don't think we will pick at it in any significant manner. I mean, what changes we made to the capital funds to sit there and reduce the overall spend. But we were having some spreadsheet issues at our last meeting, and we needed to make sure that what we were looking at was accurate. So I would envision that the Board of Selectmen will still regroup and communicate as to the main issues that you've addressed from a payroll perspective. So we'll have Eric relay those numbers if we decide that there's changes to be made.
Sure. And
Appreciate it. And thank you for letting me bring it up. This was the only time. Appreciate it.
No problem.
sure, and I think it's totally legitimate for the Board of Finance to take a hard look at what we're spending. We had a period where the town's budget, we were lucky in that we've gone through a period where the education budgets, both for the elementary school and the high school, have been contained, in a lot of cases decreasing. And we used that to fund a lot of priorities the town had. And there, while I may sound like that, there's nothing here is set in stone. I think both the capital funding and the, and all line items are up for discussion. The only thing I would say is that I did highlight in the capital fund 3 funds where I don't think we can decrease. And that is because if we decrease those below what we have, we can't meet the obligations that we have. In terms of public works, there's 2 pieces of equipment that there are leases on currently. So the majority of that budget is spoken for. The same thing will be true of the fire engine fund when the lease for that is approved and we get the vehicle, which is presumably sometime in the next 6 months. And the assumption is that the bridge on Lake Road at the Sola will be part of the 2026 construction season. And we need the bridge and culvert fund fully funded this year, so we have the money actually in the budget for next construction season when that begins. So, but the rest are can be looked at, and you know, there's, you know, it just depends where you think you want to know. Obviously, this is going to be a extremely difficult budget year. We all know that when you start looking at a 2 mil increase, you're going to have a lot of really upset people, and you know, you've got to seriously consider, you know, in years past when we've had to, the board has asked me what cuts we could minimum, you know, what cuts have the least impact and what the actual impact of those cuts are. If we get a little further in the budget process and you feel that's appropriate, I'm happy to do that. But yeah, it's going to be a hard budget year, no question about it.
Okay, do you have any other topics or questions we want to address now? Or does somebody want to make a move for adjournment? We'll pick this up again next week. Either way, we'll pick it up next week. So,
I move to adjourn.
I'll second it.
okay, we have a second. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. I'd like to thank the members of the public and the members of the Board of Finance for sticking it out. Especially the Board of Selectmen, they've got to do double duty and double pain here, looking through this over and again, but we appreciate you being available to answer questions and provide clarification. So as Eric said, it's going to be a long process. It's going to be a tough one this year. We all know it. So we'll just keep working at it bit by bit, work our way through, and we'll get there at the end. All right. Thank you, everybody.
you.
You have a good
Thanks
week,
all.
and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
All right,
Appreciate it.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.